Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Chilling Neigh Podcast, your premier VGC podcast. My name is Rushil, aka PokemonVGC, and I'm joined by Ryan, aka Sableye VGC, and Rouge instead of Tommy Hayden, who is out this week. So, Rouge can't say hello. Sableye, you want to say what's up?
Tommy left us, guys. Tommy left us. He figured real life was more important than us, which honestly is a very valid opinion. But we will miss Tommy this week, but hopefully Armarouge can fill Tommy's spot. But welcome on in, everybody. Hopefully y'all had a good week so far.
Yeah, so after an extended break, we hope everyone had great holidays and had a great week. But we have a lot of events to catch up on. So we have an IC and two regionals to talk about. So first I want to do LAIC. So that was in Brazil a few weeks ago, the 17th, 19th of November. And congrats to Marco Silva, who is the first person, I believe, who win two different international championships. He's a previous OCIC champion, and now he is LAIC champion, with Hisuian Arcanine getting another dub. And spoiler alert, it got an even further dub in a future regional after that. But congrats to Marco. And then Tiago Latanzi, I hope I'm saying that right. I apologize if not, but with a really creative team in second place. So over to you, Ryan, in terms of what stood out to you in finals or anything any
for
direction
sure.
you want to give.
I do believe Ashton Cox has two IC
Okay.
wins as well. I could be wrong on that part, but I believe he's actually won LAIC twice. I
Yeah, okay, sorry.
believe.
I meant the two different
Yeah, but two
ICs.
separate ones.
So
Yeah. You're definitely
yeah,
right in that regard. I just wanted to point. Wanted to make sure that was clear there because my brain was
yeah,
like, wait, that doesn't add up to me. But it's good. No,
yeah,
but honestly, I mean, Marco's team is just incredible, and I did a little bit of a recap on Marco's team on my channel, but he basically said, I want to have that aggressive mode with the Tornadus, the Arcanine, the Urshifu, the Gdansk, right? I want to be able to attack. I want to be able to go fast and hit hard. But then he said, what if I just also could slow the game down with an Iron Hands and an Amoonguss? And even Arcanine has that Intimidate ability, right? So yes, it's a choice banded variant on that Arcanine, but like just the ability to still switch in and hinder off your opponents when needed still could technically contribute to that balance-ish core in that aspect. And I think that's what separated Marco's team from all the other top cut tailwind teams here that obviously were still solid, but I just think that's where Marco got that edge in that tailwind matchup, you know? Instead of just having to go, I'm a spam bleak windstorm, I'm gonna hit mine, you're gonna miss yours, or I'm just gonna hit mine faster, whatever they wanted to go for. Marco always had the option to say no, I'm gonna just slow the game down and play it my way, and your only game mode that you have is to kind of go fast. And I think it was something like that that really separated Marco's team from the rest.
yeah. It's actually really interesting. Marco has pretty much all year been running Roaring Moon Balance teams, and LAIC was actually like extremely popular for Roaring Moon Balance, but he decided not to bring Roaring Moon this time, and it worked out super well for him with really well rounded team. I think Amoonguss being back in a winning team,
Mm-hmm.
not anywhere else. Oh wait, nope, that's
That's a lie.
incorrect. It was two more in top eight, but something that we've seen kind of fluctuating. Normally, we see at the start of formats maybe Amoonguss drops off as Hyper Offense picks up, and then Amoonguss comes back with full force. But this time, it came back with kind of a tempered surgence, where I feel like it didn't overtake again, where it was super
Yep.
popular. It was something that became like, okay, this is still a good mon, but still not something that was like overwhelmingly used. But as you can see, three in the top eight, just a really good mon. And Marco using it super well. Also wanna point to, I think Goldengo is interesting because I feel like a mon that we don't talk about a ton, but it's always there. It's just such a good mon. Another mon with three in the top eight. Not something that we think of like, okay, the broken mons in the format. You got Torn, you got Ursh, Water Ogerpun's really strong, Flutter. But Goldengo's kind of just always sticking there with just an amazing ability and a great spread damage with great typing. Just a really, really solid overall mon. So really like this where you could set up with the nasty plot Goldingo or just go for immediate damage with the Torn Ursh, and you have that Amoonguss support, have Iron Hands, just a really solid balanced team.
For sure.
I want to shift a little bit to the second place
Yeah.
team because this one was, I think, the story of LAIC.
Yep.
A team that, well, first there's a Regieleki, which we haven't seen
Ever.
at all since it came back into Scarlet and Violet. Not a mon that got nerfed and just a Dynamax with the other, like with Landorus back in the format, just not huge popularity for Regieleki, but with this Terra Ice Terra Blast, really cool tech to beat those Landos, and just a really aggressive hyper offense team. So curious on your thoughts on the second place team.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think Tiago made a meta call and he made it very well. Now, a lot of people sometimes will build. Actually, first off, the full team is TU Fluttermane, Water Ogerpon, Indeedee, Tornadus, and the Regieleki. And normally, when people try to make these meta calls or they try to make these off meta picks, it's very easy to start spiraling around and bringing in other off meta mons that you think work with this off meta mon that you're trying to use. And I think Tiago did a very good job of not necessarily falling for that trap. Obviously, Indeedee on a very fast team was something that hadn't really been seen in this format, outside of course, the self-proc weakness policy, armor reduce stuffs. But Tiago said it's still a good piece because if I'm going fast and I can stop my opponent from actually getting priority off onto me, I'm just going to be the fastest thing 90% of the time and be able to sweep. So it was a very good call, and he didn't fall for that. I'm just going to try to build something completely off meta. He took a concept and he took an off meta Pokemon and he surrounded it with a good core of Pokemon, right? He's got the Indeedee, which is just a good Pokemon. Torn is a very good Pokemon. Flutter TU, it's been good since those two are able to be used together. And of course, just the Water Ogerpon as well. It's just good pieces with what his version of the meta call was. And I think that's exactly how you have to approach creative team building, and especially in a format like this where options are so limited, that I definitely think he definitely approached it right, and obviously it paid dividends for him getting second place.
Yeah, I mean, we knew that some of these mons were really busted, like Chi especially, but seeing some of the damage that Terra Fire Chi did with Life Orb and Overheat, I think one-shotting Terra Water Ogerpon,
It did crit it, but
um,
yes, it did one shot it.
but still just absurd that it could even do that. And I mean, like, Tiago's been using hyper offense pretty much well for a long time, and he's done really well with it in online tours and on ladder, um and it's cool to see a hyper offense team like this do so well at such a big event, where everyone's bringing balance, everyone, and hyper offense can be very difficult to play because the mons are so frail, and if you're not picking up KOs, it can really bite you. But this was cool where it's saying, okay, I'm gonna go with Regieleki where I have this speed control against Fluttermanes, against Qian Pows, and I can just start picking up knockouts with that speed control, or I get Tailwind up and start doing big damage with Rain Dance and Ogerpon, and just a lot of options. And then I always love Indeedee as the support mon. I think Psychic Terrain, just being able to block that priority is so strong, and then having that helping hand pressure, having that follow me, just giving your mons a little bit more bulk. It was a really cool team. It was really cool to see something a bit unorthodox do really well. I think like in the
Mhm.
top 8 here, you see pretty much, I would say, 6 balance, like pretty standard-ish balanced teams. Riley's like priority heavy team that's, still balanced but
Yep.
very aggressive, like priority, and then Tiago with really hyper offensive teams. So really, really cool to see it do so well at such a big event. Um,
Yep.
I also think this event just generally had a lot of interesting teams do well, just like making day two in general. So I thought it would be fun if we kind of went down some of them here. So the first one I want to point out is at 10th, and this is thing I think Tommy would have loved to talk about, is there was a weakness policy, weak armor, stored power, Marouge, next to uh, Ursaluna, Torkoal, Specs Torkoal, Booster, Spring Moon with Earthquake to self proc, and then also Power Bracer Bronzong with skill Iron Defense, Body Press, Skill Swap, and then Ndidi. So very interesting team, very cool team. Something that you'd expect to see on ladder, but
Yeah.
not something you expect to get 10th place in IC. So very like props to Daniel Bezerra for getting 10th with this. Extremely cool, but I am still kind of wrapping my head around how they were able to get 10th at an
It
IC with a team like this.
I will go on the record here, and it's one of those ones where I am not a Psyspam believer by any means, but I am confident in when I say that Psyspam, for whatever reason, expanding force is broken enough, and when you can pilot it with the way the format has shaped up, Psyspam does take advantage of a lot of the format, and I think they paired it with some creative picks, where a lot of the times, and sometimes like when you're prepping, you don't really know what to prep for. No one is prepping for this, right? So now game one becomes learn your calcs because you don't know what's going on, you don't know how you're approaching it, and that's honestly kind of where things get it swings it in your favor, right? And I know Wolf has come out and said this in the past as well, that he likes building something new for each event because it's like no one's gonna have lines into him, but he's gonna have lines into most of everybody else if he's playing another common team, right? And it's very similar. This is the exact same reason I think this kind of stuff does well, is because Daniel here obviously knew what he was doing, what his matchups were versus Tornish, what everything was, and everybody else has to figure that out either on the fly, and they're going to be able to adapt into game two, and sometimes then by that time it's too late, right? And it's just the ability to either catch your opponents off guard or I don't know. It's just a really strong team, tons of options. Like it's not just I'm going to proc my Armor Rouge with a U-turn. If you're going to try to redirect from the U-turn, well, I'm going to click Earthquake, and I'm still going to proc my Armor Rouge, right? It was tons of tools to be able to get off what needed to get off. It felt like a really well-built team, and I hate to say it, right? Because like it does look like Sidespam, but I do think Daniel actually managed to get that done in a way that actually functions in more than one way, which normally I would be opposed to saying like, hey, this team sucks because it only has one tool, but the ability to
Yeah.
pilot it in more than one way. And it's a scary team, right? Like he also had the trick room mode as well. It wasn't just stop the Armor Rouge or stop both
Right.
versions of the Armor Rouge way to proc it. You also had to consider the fact that they could just set trick room up and win as well. So tons of ways to win, and I think that's what set this version of the weak Armor Rouge apart from some of the other ones that we've seen on ladder sometimes, where it's just, well, it's very
Yeah.
clear I'm going to set Armor Rouge up this way and I'm going to try and do that, and just being able to have those different modes, different ways to set up Armor Rouge. And I think that's what Daniel identified, and he did a very good job with it, I think.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And it's kind of interesting. So you said the thing about Wolf and building a new team, and I think absolutely, like, clearly it works for so many people. But then I think on the flip side, at number 9, we have Chuppa, who's been running pretty much
Yep.
the same team since the start of Reggie, and he has been winning left and right. And even here, I mean, everyone knows what he's gonna bring, and he still just barely, bubbles out of top cut. So really impressive, and same with Riley, I think, who has to be
Yes.
up, like considered one of the, if not the best player in the like world right now, with just his level of consistency
Mm-hmm.
is insane. Where he's pretty much top cutting every event he goes to, the same team. He's been bringing this priority spam team with Pao Knight and Urshifu and King Gambit and Ogerpon, and it's just been so strong. So cool to see, both sides of that coin, where some people, building those new teams for those events, trying to make a little bit of a meta call, or just building something new that people haven't seen. And then on the total flip side, they'll just bring the same team every event and still being so extremely consistent with it.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, is what I say. And like when you are
Yeah.
a player though of the caliber of like Choppa and of like you said Riley, for two examples, and like it's that skill level that they're at, that if they take 6 good Pokemon, they're probably going to have a good tournament run as long as they're having a good day, regardless of if the team is the best team in the format. But like if you look at Chuppa's team, you look at Riley's team, especially in this instance, for example, they are good Pokemon, right? And when you know how to pilot these good Pokemon so well because you've been doing it for so long and it's been like your go-to in the format, you know the ins and outs. You know what it's weak to. You know where your opponent is going to try and take advantage of that turn, take advantage of this turn, so to speak, right? And you can actively think about that going forward. Like, oh, I know my opponent. I've been playing this team so long. I know they're going to try and lead into me with this. Well, I know they're going to try and do that, so I can kind of readjust my normal game plan to get to know what their game plan is going to be. And that's where running a team, that same kind of concept for that team for so long, allows you to have those turns where it's like, I am so good with this team, I know how you're going to attack me, and that just gives you an inherent advantage as well. Alberto Lara is another amazing player at doing exactly that, right? We saw his big Clef Key and a set up fire type team with the Volcarona way back when. In every single event, he would consistently do well and just modify the team very slightly. And over time, it was like he just got so good with the team that like it didn't matter how, even if you had like a counter team, he would still know how to pilot around it. And that's where I think like that's why that mentality actually does work, because you get so good with it that even if like, you know where they're going to try and attack you from.
Absolutely. So good segue in bringing up the Volcarona, because one more team I wanted to quickly highlight is Paul Ruiz's team, which I think ended up doing well at a later event.
Yes, it did.
But very unique picks here, and with that Volcarona, the Sinistcha, which we haven't really seen much of since the start of the format, has kind of fallen off a bit. But cool use of it here with the hospitality, and then just kind of that support next to a Swords Dance King Gambit with Terra Poison, and that leftovers Quiver Dance Volcarona, and then just some standard good mons around it. So this tournament kind of showed a lot of room for some creativity. We also saw Lando I with Andrew Ding. Bringing that, a lot of Roaring Moons, some Reggie Dragos, so
another base Ogre as well. Just wanted to point that one out.
Oh yeah,
19th,
and some
Renzo
Clefairy there.
Yep.
I think Alex Gomez had a really cool team with the Solo Dozo and the Salamence, with the Roost Salamence, and I think it was like it was Tailwind Roost, Dracos Air Slash with Rocky Helmet. So a lot of really cool picks that people brought to LAIC. So before we move on to the next tournament, any other teams or anything else you want to call out from LAIC specifically?
No, I mean, it happened 3 weeks ago. At this point, I feel like we're a little behind just because of the way our recording schedule works. So I don't want to spend like too much time on LAIC, but I think we talked about like the big things, I think, for the most part, right? And like I said, you got the Sinistcha, you've got the Clefairies that we talked about. There's not much else. I do really like the Salamence call out as well. But other than that, there's not much else going on here. Everything else was kind of as expected. I do want to point out, though, that, like you said, Alex Gomez with the solo Dondozo, that was actually the only Dondozo to make day 2. There was none of the whole Dondozo beside Tatsugiri at LAIC. Well, there probably were, but they just didn't make day 2, I should say. But, like, it's kind of funny when you'd think, like, one of them always ends up finding a way through, but not in this case.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. That's a good call. All right, so I think it was this past weekend. 2 regionals happened. One in, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Gdansk?
I believe it is Gdansk.
Okay, Gdansk, Poland, and then there was also the Brisbane regionals in Australia. So first, we can focus in on the one in Poland. So congrats to Oliver Eskelin, who won with another Hisuian Arcanine win, but Torn Ursh, Rilla, Hisuian Arcanine, Flutter Goldango, and I believe that he's been a finalist before, but that was his first regional champion win, so huge congrats. And who got second was Simonsen, who just won a regional, the Lille regionals, just recently. So really, really stacked event here. So I'll throw it to you. What stood out to you about this?
Yeah, for sure.
Tournament?
So 2 things I do want to point out really quickly. Just off the bat, you were saying how Chapa has been running that team and it's been working for him and he's been piloting well. Same concept here with Simone. It's one of those ones where it's, hey, I'm just really good at piloting this. I'm gonna make sure I know my calcs, and once again, sending it through like you said, he got first at Lille and comes right back out in Gdansk and gets second place, right? So that's just once again a definition, example of being really good with a certain team and piloting it well. Uh, do we talk about
I
Salamence?
want to pause there. I want to pause there quickly. Are we 100% sure that Simone and Chupa aren't the same person? I want to throw that out there. Not too sure, but they look similar. They're running the same teams. They're both insanely cracked. They're winning regionals. I don't know. I don't know. I'm throwing out the conspiracy
All
theory.
right, it's done. There you go. You have it. The Chilling Neigh conspiracy theory, guys. It's starting right now. Um, but I do actually want to talk about this Salamence in third place from Eric Rios, and of course the full team: Salamence, Ogerpon,
Yep.
Water, Fluttermane, Rillaboom, Heatran, and King Gambit. Now, you're never gonna see me complain about seeing a King Gambit. Love the thing to death. But like, I think it was like a really cool meta call for Salamence, and I had talked about it a little bit in the past, where I think it needs to be used a little more, because it's a pretty cool mon, right? It resists both stabs of that water type Urshifu. And Eric said, you know what? If I'm going to resist both the Urshifu stabs, why not slap on a Rocky Helmet and just beat the Urshifu with this thing? Then you have the Draco Meteor and that special flying coverage. And I believe we talked about this, or we're talking about it on the last episode of the pod, with that special flying coverage and how good it, how good it is. And this is once again where it happens. You see the Salamence has it here, has that Air Slash, has that Draco Meteor in this case, and it's just going to Tailwind. It's going to be that Tailwind matcher. And that's kind of the way I like to play this game as well, is I don't love using Tornadus. Now, obviously, that's a little limiting. I will use it if I have to use it. If I think it's probably the best for the team, I will use it. However, it's one of those ones where I'd rather have a piece that's a little bit bulkier, supports the team a little bit better, and can still get that Tailwind up in the matchups where I kind of can't afford them to have it and myself to not, right? And Eric has that kind of team, almost a team that like I would play. It's really cool to have that like Salamence. I think it's like one of those. I don't know. I'm at a lack for words. Like I feel like I'm going around in circles right now. But like, it's
Yeah,
it's just that
it's a really
bulky piece that can match the Tailwind to allow the team to function without getting overwhelmed by opposing Tailwind. I don't know. What do you think, Conk? I'll send it to you.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's a really cool pick. Like, so we saw at LAIC, a few weeks prior to this, that Roaring Moon was picking up a big, and a lot of Roaring Moons were running maybe like if they were running a dragon move, it was breaking swipe, and so not the strongest dragon move, just kind of like a more support set. And so those big Draco meteors from Salamence really threatening um like big damage on Roaring Moons, and all just overall really solid damage throw against like the Firewater Grass cores on like Arcanine, on Rillabooms, on
Yep.
Urshifus. So really solid there. And then just the roost set with the Rocky Helmet, it's something that Torn Ursh has been. I mean, we can see out of all the top 8 teams here, 6 of them had Water Urshifu, right? And it's the the challenge of this format has been figuring out how to stop Torn Ursh, right? And I think having something like a Salamence, which is like better than a Water Ogerpon in this case of resisting Tornish, because you don't have to Terra to not have take super effective from the Bleak Wind, right? And you resist both stabs with Salamence instead of just the one with the Water Ogerpon. So it's just a little bit more of an answer to that Water Urshifu, where you also still get that Intimidate. So very, very cool pick with the Salamence. And I think it clearly worked out really well for Eric Rios.
Agreed. Uh,
Um,
do you want to talk about
the other one I
Bramblegast,
want,
or is that where you were going, or
yeah,
where were you going?
yep, I was gonna say, so the another mod that I was gonna bring up at LAIC that I forgot was there was a little bit of a resurgence of Brambleghast, and I've seen it popping up more and more. So I think it's really cool that that's brought back. So another way to counter Torn Ursh a little bit is you are immune to those Bleak Wind Storms. You can get that big damage off. You're immune to close combat, and you resist Surging Strike. So just a really interesting pick that I think we're seeing pick up quite a bit. Not insane numbers, but we're seeing good players identify that this Mon has a niche in the meta and can do really well when piloted well. So we see at sixth here, at 11th as well.
Yep.
And then I know that there were a few. I know James Beck used it at LAIC, and there were a couple others. So I think that's also a really interesting pick right now in the meta as it is right now.
For sure, and it's just one of those mods that I think would be used so much more if its moves were 100% accurate, and that's what's setting it back, because you want to pair it with the Torn, you want to get the Tailwinds up, and then you want to spam Bleak Wind and your Power Whip, your Bleak Wind and your Poltergeist. The problem is consistency with that is very hard to find, because there's a lot of games where you have to go in and you've just got to hit your moves, long story short. And when you play inaccurate moves like that, you have to approach it as if your moves are going to hit, but you also at the same time have to make sure that you're not just like using those moves without a reason to actually have a more accurate move as well. So it's kind of that fine line where it's like, okay, at some point I have to say hit my moves, but at some point you also have to kind of hold on a second, am I really about to spam this move? Like, what happens if I miss? Like, maybe that's just me personally and my like obsessively balanced play style, but I'm not a huge fan of having both my pieces that are very key in the matchup needing to hit the moves. Like when Torn is beside Ursh and you miss the odd Bleak Wind, it's the only one that can miss that's on the field. The Ursh is always going to hit its moves, right? But when it's Torn and Bramble, there's a chance you get nothing out of the turn, and that's, I feel like, what's keeping Bramblegast from really dominating right now, because it is a very good, hate to say it is a very good Pokemon when it's used properly. It's just sometimes with the move and the inaccuracy, it's not the best Pokemon when you want to go use it in practice.
Yeah, yep, makes sense. Another mon that I think is interesting that has been popping up is, and I mentioned a little bit, is the Regidrago. I think in a Flutter dominated meta, it's interesting that a mon that pretty much solely relies on its Dragon type moves is doing well, but it's a mon that really just destroy other mons if you can kind of handle the Flutter main, like Urshifu, Rillaboom, Gripons, don't like Roaring Moons, Arcanines, like don't like taking a full strength Dragon Energy. It's just extremely strong. And it's cool that we saw, at 8th here, and then I think there's another one somewhere
There's
in
one in
day
12th,
two.
one in 12th for sure.
Yeah, yep, there it is. Yep. So, just a really cool pick that I think is interesting because of like how useless it feels against Fluttermane, but it's so good against the other ones. And you see the pairings next to it where you have the Rillaboom and the Glide Ogerpon, the Urshifu, and the Goldengo. Just a lot of ways to handle Fluttermane. So if you're able to handle Fluttermane well, Drago just really goes in, and then even when you get to a little bit lower health, those Draco Meteors are picking up a lot of one-hit knockouts. So another really interesting pick as we move forward into San Antonio timeframe and any later tournaments.
For sure, it's one of those mons that like you don't really prep for. I do advise. I think it's been seen enough now that it's time to start prepping for it. But it's one of those mons that you don't really prep for, right? And it just does insane damage. I remember a few weeks ago before LAIC, because I know Joe UX9 brought this to the LAIC as well, and he also brought it to a mid-season showdown, and came up to Canada for it. He invaded, and he brought it, and I sat down. Of course, my round 1 pairing would be Joe at that point, right? Why wouldn't I pull Joe round 1? And I remember switching my Goldengo in to his Regidrago, and it just clicked Dragon Energy, and I took like 49%, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure I resist this move, but like at that point there was nothing I could do. I was just dead. Like it just took my entire team apart. Like it's just one of those mons that like I think it deserved the nerf like Regieleki got from 1.5 to 1.3. Obviously it didn't get that. It is a very good mon. It can spam a lot of damage really, really quickly, and it almost forces the Fluttermane. And I think that's something that kind of goes, like, you don't really see too often, because you look at it and you're like, okay, well, Fluttermane kind of beats it, but now you're forcing them to bring Fluttermane. Like, if I see a Regidrago, I should probably be bringing my Fairy type, right? More often than not, I want to bring my Fairy type. But like you said, if you pair it with those things that can handle the Fluttermane, in this case, Nils, like you said, with the Grass Spam and the Goldengo, I don't really want my Fluttermane there, but I also need my Fluttermane there. So it's finding that way to kind of force your opponent to bring what they don't necessarily want to bring. And I think that's kind of like the game within the game. Rather than just playing the team, you also have to think about how your opponent is going to react to you just having this piece in general, right? You may not be able to bring it versus a Flutter Mane team, but you're forcing them to bring the Flutter Mane at least one game and giving you a chance to sweep the Flutter Mane mode and then maybe bring your your Drago in afterwards, right? It gives that a lot of flexibility, right? Forces your opponents to do things they may not want to do.
Yep. Yep. And one more team that I have to highlight that I think is made by one of the coolest team builders of all time, Jamie Boyd, bringing a Galarian Articuno to get ninth place at the Poland regionals, with a Rocky Helmet, Calm Mind, Recover, Glare, Terra Ground, Terra Blast at, next to the Roaring Moon, the Arcanine,
Yep.
Urshifu, Iron Hands, and Life Orb Dango. Just such a cool pick, and to see it piloted to ninth place is just incredible. It's it's good against Urshifu, and you got the Terra Ground for Heatran, stuff like that, but honestly, just it takes a player like Jamie Boyd to pilot something like that to ninth place. Truly incredible. I think it's so fun when we have these creative teams and these niche mons that do really well. So just super fun to see that.
For sure. I'm also just gonna jump in. It's one thing to use creative Pokemon, like sometimes you get like the streamers, right? And they're like, oh, I'm gonna use this Pokemon because it's fun. Let's try it out. But when Jamie Boyd builds these teams, he is building these teams because he sees a niche in these Pokemon. He's not using Galarian Articuno for the sake of using Galarian Articuno. Watch, I didn't actually watch his team report yet on the team, so watch. He's gonna be like, I just wanted to use Galarian Articuno, and my whole point's gonna be like invalid. But like, he is using these things because he sees a niche. He sees an opening for it to fill something that his team is missing, right? And I think he is by far one of the best at doing this to ever play the game. We saw him use Salazzle in the past. I believe he's also used Cottony at events as well and done well. Like, there's just been so many teams over the years where it's like Jamie Boyd has been in the kitchen, and like you can definitely tell, and it's just another one here. I'm not even gonna try and dissect this here. I mean, if you're curious as to what this does, like I can give you an outside look, but if you're looking for the full thing, I strongly recommend checking out Boyd's team review. I'll leave that in the link if you guys are watching from YouTube. I'll leave it in the description for you.
And a couple other quick hitters on the day two. We see a Sandy Shocks in 20th.
Yep.
That's very cool. We see the only Psyspam team to make day two was the weak armor, weakness policy, Basket Legion, which is very interesting.
That's kind of wild.
Then we do get the return of Dozo with Tatsugiri.
Yep.
Just one that made day two, but we do see that one.
Yep. Something else that I really want to point out. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, we kind of skipped over it in LAIC, but we see it here, and it's Landorus Incarnate again, and this time it's getting 7th, and it's an interesting mon because it's one of those mons where like I use it, and I look and I'm like, okay, this thing really needs to get that tailwind going. This thing really needs a lot more support than I'm willing to try and work. But Davide here in 7th is like, I'm gonna build it almost as like a balancy core, and it's kind of weird, right? Like it's definitely like, obviously you have the Life Orb, you're hitting really hard, and like you want a fast type fast Pokemon that's hitting before Urshifu attacks. It's not the same speed control I'd expect to be on a Landorus I variant, but it was a really cool team, and I think it deserves to see some more usage. I think. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's cool. Like when we were playing the end of like kind of Sword and Shield, and there was like this grassroots format, Spike Myth and stuff like that. Like Lando I was really something that like was so strong. Just that Life Orb, Sheer Force, Earth Power, and now it has access to Sandsear Storm, which seen some people use it, but a lot of people haven't been running on their Lando Eyes just because it's not that consistent. But it just picks up huge knockouts, and we see the one in 7th, but I think there's also a couple others that make day two. I believe, maybe I'm incorrect. Oh no, there's one more.
27th, Matty Morgan.
Yep. So I think it's not a mon that I think will be. Endo T is just so strong, where you have that Stomping Tantrum, you have the Intimidate. It's just a really good mon. Endo I does very different things, and I think it's a mon that's a nuke, but it does need that support, and this one has interesting way of supporting with the icy wind from Fluttermane. But something I'm convinced is going to be a huge usage mon or anything like that, but it's something where clear good players have identified that this is a mon that is strong. It's probably something that hits a lot harder into the AV Iron Hands than the normal. You threaten the Goldangos, you threaten Sludge Bombs as well onto Rillabooms, onto what's it called, onto Ogrons. You got the Earth Powers into Arcanines, into Urshifus. So it does hit a lot of mons, Heatrans as well. So it does hit a lot of mons. It's interesting to see kind of how these teams are built and how they maneuver. Because as you said, like the other Orlando Eye teams have been a lot of like Tailwind teams, and what I'd more expect. So curious to see how much it'll be used. I think it's going to be something where it'll pop up here and there, but not something that'll be consistently popular.
Okay, yeah, I'm
Like,
inclined to agree. And just before, I mean, I'm pretty sure we're just about ready to move on to Brisbane, but just before that, I do really want to talk about the day 2 metagame at Gdansk, because I think it is pointing out a very concerning sign of the Regulation E metagame. And the meta, in my opinion, is we've passed a centralized format right now. Centralized formats to me aren't that bad because you kind of know what you need to build against, right? That's kind of in a way healthy. But when you have, in this regard, in day 2, you have 7 Pokemon above 40% usage, there is very clearly good, those cores you almost have to be using, right? If you are not using one of those top cores right now, it is almost like a way in a sense of I'm saying you're throwing. You're not, I don't know how to word it. It's one of those ones where it's like, if you're not using Tornursh, you better have an actual reason to not be using Tornursh. You better have the answer. Because if you're not using it, I think you're hindering yourself at this point. The core right now is incredibly strong, and it's not that like having Tornursh in the meta is inherently a problem. It's that there's not a whole lot that really goes against it, and that's why you see these Pokemon at 40% plus usage. And 7 of them. It's insane. I don't think it's healthy for the game. What are your thoughts on that, Conk?
yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, like 7 is like it's more than even just like a standard team, right?
Yes.
Like you have a
Yes.
+1. It's kind of crazy. Um, I think it's also funny that we came into this format with Ogerpon introduced and the 4 different forms, and we said, okay, this is the end of Urshifu, and I mean, no one really thought the real end, but Urshifu usage did go down a bit, and Ogerpon was looking like it was gonna be something that really checked Urshifu a lot, and we're a few months in, and that's really not the case at all. Tornursh keeps winning. Ogerpon usage has really gone down, and we see that Urshifu is still king, and there hasn't been a lot of consistent answers to it, and so it's something where, like, either you are using it, and like if you're not using it, like we see again in this top 8, we see 6 of them using Urshifu,
Yep.
and the 2 not using Urshifu. One of them has a Sinistcha, um, and then you have that Terrifying Lando. You have the Terragrass Volcarona with the Flame Body. So you have some answers with and then Iron Hands with Wild Charge, and the other one has Salamence with Rocky Helmet, and Rillaboom and Ogerpon Water.
Yep.
So they have to have so many answers to to Urshifu on their team and have other ways of dealing damage. But it's clearly a very creative team building that has to go away from it. Otherwise, it's just so easy to slap on a Torn Ursh or just an Urshifu in general because it's so strong. So I think it is in its place in the meta where I can understand that people are having the most fun with it because there's just again 7 months with 40% usage. You're queuing up a game, you're expecting to see 3-4 of them at least. I now what I'll say is I'm one of those people that hasn't used Torn Ursh, and I'm the person that is not using those teams at all. I'm using like Dondozo, Psyspam, stuff like that. I think there is still room, and there's people showing us that there is still room to build creatively, not be forced to use Torn Ursh. But I think we are in a place where it's a little bit over centralized for sure. I think there is room for something to be introduced coming out soon, so it's going to be very interesting to see how that goes into Reg F and what will be the meta. Will there be a check to Torn Ursh? What will it be? Something else be OP? We'll see. But I agree that Mon's over 40%. That's just kind of insane.
Yeah, it's a little much in my opinion. It's like I don't like I said I don't think it's like the worst thing in the world, but like it's by far it's kind of scary to look at when you ask me because like I like having different options and seeing different teams, right? Like normally like people will be like, oh, it's
Yep.
all the same teams in Top Cut, right? That's like the common complaint you get from like the I don't want to like the more casual players that just kind of are here to watch the tournaments.
Right.
And that's normally the common complaint. And normally you're able to kind of go, this meta is actually very diverse. But I don't think with Regulation E we can kind of say that anymore because it pretty much is the same mods for the most part. Obviously, there's minor variations and, like you said, room to grow as well. But I don't know. It's a little concerning. So I'm hoping Regulation F, like you said, can kind of shake that up moving forward.
Yeah. So this is, I think, a funny transition now to Brisbane because we talked about how centralized the meta is, and Australia's got its own meta, and
Yep.
you can see all the top 8 are from Australia, and pretty much everyone in day 2 is from Australia or nearing
Yep.
country. But this meta just some. So congrats to Nicholas Khan or Nicholas Khan for winning with Lando, Heatran, Iron Hands, Amoonguss, Flutter, Ogerpon Water.
Yes.
Fairly standard, nothing too crazy.
Yep.
But as soon as you get to the second rung, you get second place had a Dusclops, Roaring Moon Dusclops balance team. We have 2 back-to-back Psyspam teams. Very different Psyspam teams. And then in 5th place we have a Clefable, which is just I don't even know
Yep.
what to say about the Clefable. We have a Como in here. So a lot of mons here. Where do you want to start?
I want to
I'll throw
start
it to you.
actually with the fact that I know you listed a few things that were here, but I want to make sure it's known that there is not a single Tornadus Urshifu in top 8. That is where my eyes immediately went when I saw this top cut. It is obviously there's a Clefable. Let's get to that. We'll get to that very shortly. But like no Torn Ursh, and it just goes to show you how different regions have different metagames, and Europe tends to be a more balanced based approach to the game. NA as of late has started taking a little bit more aggressive on the balanced stuff, right? And like you get these different regions that have different things, and normally Australia is a bit I don't know how to word this, for lack of a better term, it's kind of like all over the place. Like it's they're not
Yep.
like there isn't really a
It's
core.
pretty,
Like I don't know how to word it because
Yeah.
it's like it's not like the teams are like out there, but the teams are definitely not what you'd expect from almost like the rest of the world, so to speak. Like it's a really it's weird, right? Because like the Australian community is definitely part of the community, right? And it's like you see them in these online tournaments, and like you see common teams come out of Australia sometimes, but then other times you look at their metagame and it's like there's a Clefable in 5th. What's going on here? So we might as well get to the
Yep.
Clefable in 5th. So you want to take this one?
I have this really interesting team. So it's Clefable with Rocky Helmet, Unaware, Terra Water with Moonblast, Ice Beam, Follow Me, Protect. And then there's the Grassy Glide spam with Fire Ogre Pun and Rillaboom, Life Orb Glamora with Sludge Bomb, Earth Power, Sub, and Spiky Shield, Scarf Lando with Taunt, and then Boggles Gambit with Iron Head, Sucker Punch, Sword Stance, Protect. So usually we see the Darks with the Kowtow Sucker, but this one had the Iron Head and the Sucker. So I think this is a really cool team. I'm not like percent sure why I the Clefable. What it seems like to me is it's you have the Rocky Helmet with the Terra Water. You have a little bit of an Ursh check, but also it's just good against general setup stuff like Dozo as well with the Unaware. You can kind of just keep following me away some of those attacks. So I see the vision a little bit, but it is a very interesting choice. Not something that I would have at all. But it's cool to see something like that do well. And I think the Life Orb Glamora is actually the coolest part of this. Well, not the coolest part, but it's a very cool part of the team for me, where that Life Orb Sludge Bomb is doing so much damage to stuff like Rillaboom, even through the AV, and then just probably Okoing Ogre Puns Glamora having an extremely high special attack stat. People don't normally recognize that as much because it's a little bit used more as the stall mode,
Yep.
but Therefore was a very cool pick. And then just some cool mons all around, but well, I don't even know what to say,
Yeah.
honestly. It's just it
Yeah.
is certainly a pick.
Yeah, no, it's wild, right? Because like it's a really cool team, and like I think Cliff Fable is cool, right? Because like there's not a lot of fairy coverage in this format. If you're not using Fluttermane, you really don't have that fairy type offensive coverage. And Cliff Fable actually gave them that on a defensive piece. So like now you're eating the surging strike stuff, you're moon blasting them back, you're probably taking out most Urshifus like that, right? Like you said, the unaware is very good into Dondozo because you're just ignoring the fact that it's boosted up. If it wants to tear a dragon, now you have the moonblast damage, which is still going to be incredible. So it feels like as weird as it seems, it almost feels like it makes sense. Obviously, like I can't wrap my head around the full construction of the team, but I think like for what Daniel was going for, I think they did it very well, and obviously they did if they managed to get fifth. So they saw something, and clearly they got it right.
Yep. Very interesting. And then I think the other really funny thing is that Psyspam teams were in the top four, but both of them lost in top four. So it was kind of like this mini boss that both
Yep.
Nicholas Khan and Lewis Tan had
Balance.
to go through to get to finals.
Balance one.
Um,
Let's go. Now,
it's
I
it's
need
funny.
Tommy here.
I
This isn't as fun trashing Psyspam when Tommy's not beside me.
I know, especially because we had been running the Lilligant Torkoal with the Psyspam stuff. It would have been really fun to
Yeah.
put in a little bit. Not me being a hypocrite because I'm running Psyspam right now, but we're gonna ignore that.
Boo.
Uh, but I think it's interesting that like we said, we identified a little bit earlier, like Indeed's just really good support, and Psyspam's just it's such good neutral damage
Mm-hmm.
into so many mons in the meta and super effective into a lot of others too. So I think that's not going away. I think Spam's having its last moment before Reg F comes around and the almighty cat Incineroar comes back and just pretty much puts an end to Spam forever.
Yep.
But I think we will see some more Spam do well. In San Antonio particularly, I think it's just in a really good, really strong place. I also think it's interesting we see this Como come back. Not something that we've really seen since it won that regional.
Mm-hmm.
But another strong placement, another, kind of identifying, okay, people about Como a little bit, brought it back. It's still a strong pick, still a very physically leaning meta. And we see a similar concept with the Hisuian Gudra in 10th place.
Yep.
So something that kind of they both recognize that, hey, Iron Defense body press stuff, feel good if you can position it correctly. So another strong pick
Mm-hmm.
for the Brisbane regionals. So a lot of really interesting picks here.
Yeah. One thing I do want to point out just before we wrap up Brisbane is I want to talk about the 28th place team really quickly. And this team is absolutely crazy, but like Chandelure is insane. Safety Goggles, Terra Poison, Urshifu Dark is really, really cool as well. And Benji's been a
Yep.
player that actually studied in Toronto for a little bit, so he was a local for quite a bit of time. So really great guy, but also just a really incredible player. The way he thinks about the game and the way he approaches the game, it's I don't know how to word it because I want to say like it's different, but it's also like it looks like it's kind of like messed up the way he approaches the game because like you look at it it's like, oh, Chandelure, what does Chandelure do, right? But like he was kind of cooking with this team, and honestly, really happy to see him still playing as strong as he very clearly was back when he was over in the North American side of things as well. So definitely cool to see
Yep.
the Chandelure make top cut there, and just wanted to mention it.
That's a really good call out. Yeah, that's just a super cool pick. It's going to be interesting because I think there's a sort of sense of like, okay, Brisbane was in it's kind of its own
Mm-hmm.
meta a little bit, and I don't think it's going to have a big impact on any, the future tournaments. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is San Antonio the only tournament left in E, or is there a European one still?
I want to say there is a European one, but I am gonna be completely honest with you. I do not know what's going on in the European scene right now, so I'm not sure if there actually is or not. But I would imagine there's only one or
Yeah,
two tournaments left in Regulation E. I know for sure it's San Antonio, and I'm not certain if there's
yeah.
another.
I just there is one in Germany
Okay,
in
cool.
December. So yeah, I think we're gonna see a lot of carryover from the Gdansk regional, and just like a lot of general tourner stuff with um, some niche picks here and there. But I think from seeing we've seen a meta kind of really develop and really centralize, and it's going to be very interesting to see with the DLC coming out
Hmm.
between now and when we next record, how that's really going to change Regulation F, and to see if there's going to be any final innovations that people have been saving or looking into as we kind of close off this format.
For sure.
Now, I think we're kind of at a time where we were going to talk team building and kind of our perspectives on team
Yeah.
building, but we are kind of running to a point where I don't think we'd have enough time to give that
Yeah.
an
We'll have
a full amount of attention. But I think this is something that we can definitely touch upon next time. I think it's gonna be a really fun conversation for
for
next
sure.
time, especially when Tommy comes back
Yep.
too. And we'll tweet this out as well. But I think a question for all of our listeners is, what do you want to hear from us when we talk about our team building conversations? Any specific questions for us that we can answer? Because I think you, me, and Tommy all have a very different perspective on team building and just the types of teams we use. And I think it'd be really cool to share all our perspectives. And we'll do a bit of a San Antonio preview next time as
Yep.
well. But I think I really want to hear I really want to talk about what you guys want to hear about. So
Yeah.
really, it's any and all questions, because I think we're gonna have a really fun conversation next time.
We'll also have a lot more time to have those conversations. We won't have any regional results to go over. Well, like I said, like you said, you'll have
Yep.
the San Antonio to look forward to, but we won't really have anything to talk about that had just passed. So we'll definitely be having some more, I guess, how do I word this, like better, I guess, conversations about not just like results, but we'll have like other topics as well. So right, like Rushil said, like we'll have the team building stuff, and just in general, like honestly, what do you guys want to hear? Because like, why not?
Yep. And stay tuned, because we also might we're starting to look for guests and stuff like that.
Yes.
So if you know anyone that you really want to see come on the pod, please also let us know, because we are more than happy to host people. So really excited about that. Really excited about a lot of the future things that we have coming for the podcast. But I think that's all we have for now.
Actually,
Anything
can
else
I
that I
make
forgot?
can I make a request real quick for a guest we should have on the pod?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna
Yeah,
put it
let's
out
do
there.
it.
I think we should invite Tom Hayden 27 back. I mean, I kind of feel bad.
I don't know. I don't know. It was so much more peaceful,
it
this week.
it
But
really
we'll
was. I
see.
don't
We'll see.
didn't have to worry about anybody dropping those curse words halfway through, forcing me to edit a little more.
Yep. Stay tuned for in 2 weeks to see if Tommy makes it back on the
Yeah.
show. And also, please, if you made it this far, tweet out. I loved seeing Sableye and Ryan fight halfway through, or not Sableye and Ryan, Sableye and Kong fight halfway through
Yeah.
the pod, because I want to see if people
Yeah.
catch on or not. Um, but all right, that's all I had. Anything else missed?
No, honestly, I don't have too much else. My mindset, I'm pretty much done with Regulation E at this point. So I'm really looking forward to
Yeah.
discussing other things in the next episode. Maybe a slight preview as Regulation F as well. At some point, we're gonna have to switch over to that. But with that, guys, once again, just honestly, just thank you all so much for watching. And as Tommy would say, love ya. But we're not gonna have that at the end of the video today. It's gonna be it's gonna be this end. It's gonna be this like, void at the end of the episode. But no, honestly, guys, thank you all so much for sticking around, especially if you made it this long. We appreciate every single one of you. But Conk, you can go ahead and wrap this up as usual.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. We will see you guys again in 2 weeks. Bye, everyone.
See ya. Love ya.